Today my guest is Morgan Chegwidden, and you are the Assistant Director of the Neighborhood and Family Services here in San Angelo. Thank you so much for taking the time out, because I know your schedule is flooded.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. I'm happy we could connect.
All right, so let's start out, before we get into what you do for the city, just give us some history about how did you get involved with the city?
Oh, that's a history lesson. Let's see. So I've been employed with the city since 2006 when I was a tiny infant, and I got involved in animal welfare really just by volunteering first. In my old role at the city, I worked in the finance department, so I worked closely with the animal services division. I worked closely with the health department on their needs, their payroll, just whatever they needed. And so I noticed that they had some staff turnover, they needed some help, and I had asked about volunteering. And one day I said, "Hey, I'm just going to be there Saturday at 8. You've been meaning to get me some stuff about volunteering. I'm just going to show up. I've invited myself at this point." And I guess the rest is history. That was probably around 2010, 2011.
Oh wow!
So it's it's been a minute.
Your job as the assistant director isn't just over the animal shelter, right? So do you just kind of want to let everybody know, what does your job entail?
Yeah, I'm actually speaking to a group, not in Texas, another rescue group, and they were like, "Tell me again." I was like, "It's a tongue twister between my last name and my job title. It's a lot." So, but I said, I really think it makes a lot of sense, and if you have this opportunity in your community, I would advocate for it as well. So the city's Neighborhood and Family Services Department comprises 4 divisions, right? So we have code compliance, housing support, WIC, and animal services. And you are now invited to make a face like, why do those things have anything in common? And it makes sense because really those 4 very diverse groups serve the same clientele, the same customers, right?
Okay.
Your mom that's enrolling in WIC probably wants to connect with like a low-cost spay neuter option for her pet. Your first-time home buyer that's qualifying for like HUD assistance, for like down payment assistance, maybe also has a dog and needs to get like a fence inspection and secure enclosure check, right? Like all of us are working in like what we call the target neighborhoods, and it's where you see more blighted homes, it's where you see more code compliance violations like high weeds and junk, and it's where you see more dogs at large. And so folks from that background, and so it's not uncommon that we may be responding to a case from the animal services perspective, but the code compliance officers also have a case at that same address. So we're really just working together about a lot of outreach, a lot of referrals to programming to get people what they need, not only just to be compliant, but also to just get resources so that they can be thriving and everyone in their household taken care of, including their pets.
Yeah, so I can see like how all those areas would be connected. So is there, obviously there's separate personnel underneath you that's delegated, for each area. But how does the city, if we talk about funding, how does that work? Because all those programs have to be funded.
They do. So, my boss, Bob Solis, is the Director of Neighborhood and Family Services, and his primary is supporting the 3 divisions: WIC, housing support, and code compliance. So he kind of cuts me loose to be completely dedicated to animal services. And so that's shelter operations, sure, like direct animal care. It's also the animal services officers, all the field operations.
Okay.
And then it's all of our programming like outreach and getting people connected with services for all of that. And so that's kind of the hierarchy about how we carve that out. But also, the one thing that's nice about being part of the Neighborhood and Family Services Division is that the Animal Services Division is general funded.
Okay.
And we throw that term around a lot, but what that just means is that I'm tax funded, right? And the general fund is where a lot of operations kind of land there, right? So anything that's specific, like you've been to our airport, when you bought a ticket there, you paid an airport fee that goes in the airport fund to run the airport. I can never use airport money, and they're never competing with me for money. The airport fund is
They have their own
own
section.
Yeah. Same with water fund. Same with the Texas Big Sports Complex has its own fund, as an example. So for anything that's general fund, that includes me, animal services. That includes police, fire, parks, really just anything that doesn't make its own money, right? And so that means it's tax funded.
Mm-hmm.
So the biggest component of the general fund revenue is property tax. So what you pay each, December, January timeframe for your property taxes, or what you pay in rent that your landlord then pays for property taxes, and then sales tax, that 8 cents that you pay on, any purchases at the store or any online purchases. 1% of that comes to the city's general fund, and that is primarily how I'm funded, how animal services is funded.
The taxes that the community pays, that's what that goes into. I know online there's been a lot of talk about like your animal control officers not going out and not doing their job, but the city it's what, a 60-mile radius, and you only have 4 officers, correct?
Yeah.
To cover that whole space, and in order to have more, which is needed to help control the stray population, it would have to be funded. So that would, and if you're funded out of our taxes, that would probably increase taxes. So I don't know if people can I don't know if they're connecting that, like the city just can't go and say, all right, you need, Morgan, I know you need 2-3 more officers, so we'll just hire them.
Right.
Like there's more goes into that, and even it's pretty cool how you were telling me like every area is kind of like compartmentalized, like where the funds go. It would be interesting to see like how they, I know that's probably like a question for like somebody like, in the city that deals with that, but how they divide that, like where, like what fund goes to what area, like where it's needed most.
Yeah, because some revenue is restricted, right? Like when we levy a fee, or when the city collects a fee, like for the airport,
Mm-hmm.
that can only be used for the airport, nobody else can touch it, right? The FAA said that. They said, you can have an airport, but you better keep that money there, right? But something like, I don't know, I can't think of another example. Some fees are not restricted in that way. And so, but the pie's only as big as it is, right? And
Right.
you heard some of the folks that I'm competing with, like if you're on social media, you're also hearing about the issues that the police department's facing
Mm-hmm.
with recruiting, retaining,
Yes.
professionals. And so when the city council sits down and says, so we have a pie, and this is
It's
how
only
much-
this big.
It's only this big. So we've levied this amount in property taxes. Can we make property tax go up? Maybe a little bit every year. And there are things we do to do that and invest in the community and have more and valuable property in town. We want to be a rich and thriving economic system, right?
Mm-hmm.
But this year for fiscal year 24, because we've already started the new year,
Mm-hmm.
the pie's only this big.
Right.
So if I give this much to police,
Mhm.
and this much to fire, and this much to parks, there's this much for animal services.
Right.
And when I say to the city manager, I need 2 animal services officers today, right? Because in the time I've been volunteering since 2011 at the shelter, we've had 4 animal services officers. And certainly our people population has increased since that time, and our staffing hasn't.
Mhm.
Certainly our animal population feels like it's increased since that time. And our calls for service have increased, right? That we've been on a journey about life saving. We've been on a journey about being able to offer life first to the animals in our care. And we did that through changing the culture around cats, around dogs, around any animals in our community, right? Because we also respond to livestock, wildlife, like
Yeah, it's not just dogs.
Right.
It's not just dogs and cats. It's
So with that growth, we've not seen that growth in staffing or that investment in staffing. And so you're right. I have 4 animal services officers. We take what I call regular, any call for service, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And then after 5, weekends, holidays, there are emergency calls that we respond to. We do have an on-call officer around the clock that's available, and that's for things like if you've been bitten by an animal, if
Emergency situations.
yeah. And so to staff that round the clock, or to have additional staff, or to have a faster response, this is my new tagline with my boss. It just takes money. Like it seems like an insurmountable goal, but it is getting a lot of attention right now. And so for folks that have a real heart for it and are seeing it, and they're like, I am sick of these like 2 dogs that my neighbor let loose, and now it's not 2 dogs anymore. It's a number of dogs. Then I really recommend reaching out to your elected official, to your council member, and saying, I advocate that this be considered in your annual plan, right? Because I forget, there's something you said earlier that made me think that when we have the pie and it's only so big,
Right.
that the city council does set priorities and set goals. And so every year they meet and they say, our most important goal is having, for a few years now, it's been having an effective water supply, right? There was a concern several years ago that we were gonna run out of water. We only had 20 months of
Remember
water.
that.
Yeah, so we've got a new water supply online. We issued the debt for that. We did all of the work to do that, and continue to address that. But there are a number of priorities like that. And so there's been like a top 5 list, a top 6 list over the years where the city council have said, these are the 6 things that are the most important to me. And you can say to your elected official, animal services needs to be one of those things, right? Whether that's shelter improvements. My facility was built in 1999 and shows it.
Hasn't been updated since.
We do have a small, what I call a small capital project that we're undertaking into the fall, winter of this year. That we can talk more about if you want, but I don't know how interesting that is to anybody else. But yeah, to say, to advocate and say, just fund it, you guys. Like, I don't know where the money's gotta come from. I don't know what the revenue is. I mean, from a constituent standpoint, right? Your average citizen's like, I don't know what it takes, but I just need it to have some attention. That's an option. And I don't mean to throw my council members under the bus. Like they're hearing this too, right?
Yes.
They're getting those calls, they're getting those complaints. And so that's one way to continue to advocate for it and say, we just need more resources. We've gotta be able to handle this.
Right. So how can the community reach out to them? Like if you wanna just kind of let them know like the best way to do that, to go about that.
I believe the city's website, I believe the short URL to get connected to your council member is COSATX.us /council. And there's an interactive map. So if you live in city limits but you don't know who your council member is, you type in your address and it says, oh, it's this person. And you can click on that link and it'll open up an email box. And that, our council members are elected officials, they're volunteers, they are not paid full-time staff. So I think email is the best and fastest way to get in touch with them. It also lets, because you see on social media, there are people that are really passionate about this, and there are people that are really moved by this. And so I think being able to have the venue to really thoughtfully put down, like in an email, I've observed this it needs improvement. Please take action on this. I think that really speaks to it a lot. And then having that, leaving your phone number at the end if they want to give you a call and find out more information, or at least follow up with you. They can reply to your email, or they can, if you provide that additional contact info. But I think that's the best and easiest way to get a hold of your council member. Certainly each council meeting, they meet about twice monthly, is an open meeting as well. And so you can attend, and any citizen can attend any of those meetings, but most San Angeloans are busy. At 8:30 in the morning on a Tuesday, and so just know that your council members that are elected officials, they're really responsive to their constituents. We have a really great group of council members. They're really passionate about this community, again, thriving and doing well, and San Angeloans having what they need, including a safe place to walk, or dogs that are always loose at a certain school, or whatever it may be.
How big of an issue is this truly? Is it just in those lower income areas, or is this, how would you rate the stray issue that we're having?
Let's see, I can tell you that, we just finished the fiscal year September 30th, and so for 2023 we worked about 6,100 cases, meaning animal services officers were
6,100?
6,000 cases.
Wow.
For 4 folks to work. And so some of those were cruelty investigations, and that takes, days and hours of observing, collecting evidence, making application to the
Investigating.
court, impounding animals, reporting back to the court in a hearing, looping in law enforcement. So some of those are really involved, and
Mhm.
some of those are, called to, 800 North Monroe for loose dog. And some of those are maybe, a 30-minute call.
Right.
And so it runs the gamut, but that includes bite cases, that includes loose dogs. So I would say that that's in line with last year. That's pretty similar. Last year we worked about 6,200 cases, and this year we're at 6,100. One thing that I think anybody that's hiring for jobs right now, or anybody that's working at a place right now, you can see I had vacancies in 2023, right? So there was some of that time that I only had 3 animal services officers, or right now I do have 4 animal services officers, but only 2 are certified, right? There's a state licensing requirement that goes through all of this. So I'm sure you're working places where everybody's doing, 1 and 2 people's jobs because there's not enough people.
Multitasking, yeah.
Yeah, so there's something to be accounted for there. So how big is our stray problem? I mean, it's more than I'm comfortable with. I think I think that's fair to say. Is it worse than it was last year? There's a unique phenomenon that happens with it when a community is deciding what's important to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
That when people who are passionate about animal welfare came to the shelter, like myself, when I started volunteering in 2011, and said, can we kill less animals? Can we track? Can we save? What can we do? What can be done, right? And over these years in trying it, what that also meant was, as we shifted our culture around what we were okay with and what behavior we were okay with, we shined a light on, we expect responsible pet ownership. We expect pets to have a chance at life. We expect reasonable accommodations for animals with treatable medical, whatever it is. And I think what that meant was parts of town, like my target neighborhoods, that have had chronic dogs at large for, I don't know, ever. I've lived here 20 years, and
so this isn't a new issue.
I don't know how to, there's a few things, right?
Okay.
Are there more dogs at large this year than last year? I don't know. Are there more dogs at large this year than 10 years ago? Maybe.
Okay.
But are we getting more calls for service, right? That used to, if there were dogs loose on, I don't know, Prizer Street, 20th Street, people would be like, oh yeah, I live on Prizer, there's just loose dogs, and they wouldn't necessarily call it in.
So there's more reporting of strays.
Because we've said animal welfare is important in San Angelo, and they've said, well, animal welfare is not this dog running loose, is not this dog being a danger to itself and potentially others, right? If it's an aggressive dog, for example. So we get more calls for service than we used to. Are there more stray dogs? Yeah, in parts of town, I would say yeah. When I started working for the city, I actually started at the police department.
Okay.
And so every once in a while I can draw some similarities, right? And so I started working at the police department in 2006, and for people that can remember 2006, we didn't all have a smartphone at our hip, right? And so if there was a wreck on the loop in 2006, we would get a call about it. But if there's a wreck on the loop today, dispatch gets 8 calls about it, and they're like, we've got it, thank you so much, we appreciate your concern. And I think we're seeing some of that, right? It's not because more people have smartphones, because clearly that's been a thing around for a while, but just we've shined a light and insisted that these animals deserve an audience. And San Angelo has heard us and said, yeah, these animals too, these on my street, and we hear you, and that's what we're here for, and we just haven't funded and grown. I call it the messy middle. We're in the messy middle. We set these goals, we tried these things, we've shifted so many things. There were a lot of things I changed when I was new, and I've worked here long enough where we're changing some of those things too. Just we have different opportunities available to us, and we want to make sure San Angeloans know about those opportunities too. So yeah, we get more calls for service than we used to. I think that's absolutely fair to say.
It's almost like a movement, like an online movement that's calling for action. But it's like they don't know where to direct that, because I see they'll go after y'all, they'll go after pods, they'll go after each other, they're just angry and they want to fix the situation, but they don't know where to go to get it fixed, or who, like they feel like they want to put the blame somewhere, like somebody's got to, like, but it's really not one sole person, like, or one sole like agency. It's a lot of it is, I was talking to the director of PAWS, Jeannie Wilson. A lot of it is the community itself. Like, these animals come from somewhere, So is it like the community against the community? Like, should the community be mad at themselves in a way? Like, what is the heart of this, the issue, and what do you think would be the solution? Like, what should we be doing? Like, what is going to be the most effective?
Well, I think that's a really good question. And I have thoughts. And I'm one person, right? So my thoughts are this.
I'm just going to pick your brain.
Yeah. I think like any population, this public opinion about animal welfare is in like a bell curve, right? Where there is a extreme minority that says save them all. Right? Then there's an extreme minority that says kill them all.
Right.
Go back to catching. I don't care.
No lambing, basically. Yeah.
Get your animal services officers out there with dart guns and catch them all, round them up, and kill them.
Sad.
Right?
Yeah, I laugh, but it's
You hear it, right? And so I think that the average San Angeloan falls in the middle of that bell curve, right? The average San Angeloan is like, this is our new language, right? I'm supportive of reasonable resources deployed for a chance at life first. Right? There's a lot of baggage that comes with like that no-kill terminology that's not true to San Angelo, right? This shelter and animal services is the shelter that this community wants it to be, right? So to the extent San Angelo can help, right? I think San Angelo is full of helpers. I think San Angelo is full of neighbors helping neighbors, right? I spoke to a family recently. They were advocating for their relative. She was a recent widow. Her husband had just passed away. About 60 days later, like no amount of time later, she had a debilitating stroke and had to be hospitalized. And her main concern was for her dog, right? Like that's the last member of her family that's left. And she's like, what do I do? And so the family was reaching out and saying, like, what should we do and what can we do? And, she doesn't have children and, what are all the things we can do? And so we spoke with them for a bit, and what they decided to do was like a safety network of like lifelong friends and family members that just came together and housed this dog temporarily until they knew better what her prognosis was. Was she ever going to be able to live independently again? Was she ever going to be able to have her dog back again? And just while we figured that out, let's find somebody that can hang on to this dog. It helped that it was a nice, like medium-sized dog, right? But that's San Angelo's helpers, right? That's neighbors helping neighbors, and whatever criticisms around it, that's community supported sheltering, right? That dog didn't need a shelter intake. That family has people that are helping taking her to doctor's appointments, helping mow her grass and maintain her house while she's hospitalized. And the dog is just one more thing she needs in support while she's being hospitalized, right? And so, should it be a thing where the community should be mad at itself, or should it be a thing where this is where I get a lot of heartburn is when the 76904 is mad at the 76905, and I'm like, guys are all San Angeloans and we all pay taxes, so what does that look like? And so I think that we've aimed for the highest amount of involvement from San Angelo, and especially with the COVID-19 crisis, with the change and continued fallout in the economy from that, I recognize that there are San Angeloans that can't do any more, right? They've adopted from me. They maybe fostered and adopted that dog, whatever it is. And when they say, I'm done, I can't help anymore. I can't donate financially. I can't donate supplies. I can't foster or adopt or anything else. I've done all I can do. I will say, I hear you. And if I have to euthanize for space, right, because you see that I regularly share a euthanasia list, where I say, if a dog is beyond medical care, right, it's been assessed and it's beyond any kind of medical treatment, or the treatment is so costly. If it was your own dog, you would treat, right? but maybe your neighbor nearby is like, that's something I can't take on. I can't treat my dog for that, right? So we're gonna offer reasonable treatment. We're gonna do our best. We work closely with Contra Valley Cause on making those determinations and what investment can be made. Same for temperament. If there's an animal who's really reactive, you work with so many of our I don't want to say tough dogs, but dogs that need some more help.
Behavioral issues.
Yeah. In a shelter environment, it's the absolute worst place for them to have any kind of like rehab. Like nobody's getting rehabbed in a shelter, right?
No.
It's like yeah. So once those animals, once animals with really just reactivity beyond what we can handle and medical beyond what we can handle are euthanized humanely, and I'm still full. And I have to say to San Angelo, look, I picked 8 faces. Help me know, right? And to the extent that San Angelo says, yeah, no, I can't, I'm full, then I would do the unthinkable, right? That's something that I haven't had to do in my tenure, but used to be quite common at San Angelo Animal Services, which is take a perfectly healthy, well-tempered animal and issue the drugs to someone who's certified to put that animal down. Right? That's not something we've had to do. That's also not a decision I'm going to make in a vacuum. When I have to consider euthanizing for space, and every animal has gone home that can go home, and every animal that has been euthanized that is, beyond medical or behavioral, then, and I'm still full, then those are the conversations that we're having. So we're listening to the community and saying, are you done? Are you full? Have you done everything you can do? Do you want to, and I'll say this, if we did euthanize for space, it's not the end of the world, right? This, again, all that baggage that comes with no kill, and talk about a lot about having a 90% live release rate and, what those metrics are. And listen, I am a math nerd. My background is in finance. I love all the data. But just the math is gonna math, right? Let's just make the best decision we can with the resources we have in that moment.
Yes.
And that's what my team's equipped to do, to be able to say, look, it might not have been the right judgment call, but this is what I did with what I had in the moment. And I'm like, good on you. Let's continue. Let's follow up, right? Next day, when we have some more resources, some more help, whatever it may be, let's pick that back up and take it further. But just in the moment, are we making the best choice that we can in that moment? Sure. So, should San Angelo be blaming themselves? I don't think so. I really don't think so. I just have such a heart for people, right? I work in animal services, and having a giant 18-pound cat in my office because he is just very, very special and can't be kenneled, that's like a perk of the job. That is not why I work there, right? I work there because I love this community. I work there because I want to serve San Angeloans. I work there because this is a people business. Why do I have 178 dogs at my shelter this morning? Because people are in crisis and have lost their dog and don't have the resources, right? I serve a ton of people. I'm so sorry, I'm just going on and on.
Keep going, that's fine.
I serve a ton of people who, maybe the general term is that they're marginalized people, right? They are folks that maybe English is not their first language, maybe they have transportation issues, maybe they have unreliable housing or restricted housing where they can't have their pets. Maybe they have a general distrust of government, like I hear you, right? And so to the extent I can say, look, just me to you, you're a person that loves your dog. I spoke with a gentleman yesterday and he was hot. He was really worked up. And I said, I want to give credit where credit is due. Your dogs are nice, your dogs are healthy, they're well taken care of. So can we at least agree that I've met your dogs and I like them? I like them so much I never want to see them again.
Right.
So how do we equip you to be able to keep them secure, get them spay-neutered, like all of the things, right?
Right.
And I've had such a shift from when I first got started in volunteering in animal welfare, volunteered there at the shelter, then started volunteering with a nonprofit group that's defunct now, but and then came to this role. One thing that we really, really adopted early on in my tenure was our return to owner, right? That 9 homes out of 10 are a better home than my shelter.
Right.
Right? I could build the sexiest, most beautiful shelter. And I'm still saying, like, 9 out of 10 homes are better for that
Right,
dog
then
than the
that
shelter.
environment.
Yes.
Right.
So even if, so 1, 2, if I have somebody who is marginalized, somebody who's a general distrust of government, somebody who suspects their dog wound up at the shelter, but they're not coming to get it, right?
Right.
I'm not walking in there. They're gonna give me tickets. They're gonna charge me fees. They're gonna
think I'm a bad
turn
person.
me into ice or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know their phone number, you guys. I just love your dog and want it back with you, right? So we learned that folks experiencing that, and they wound up, their dog winds up at the shelter. Within 6 months, they have a new dog. They have a new dog. And since I'm committed to life saving, in 6 months, I still have your dog.
Right.
So can I just get you your dog back? Can I just let's just maintain, I would like to maintain that human animal bond for the natural life of your pet, right? And so that really pivoted what we can do. And that really pivoted what our animal services officers do. That, you know, a guy in a truck with the city logo pulls up to your house and knocks on the door. Are you answering the door? There are a number of people that are not, right?
Yeah.
But we do a lot of outreach. We do a lot of presence in specific neighborhoods, those target neighborhoods, to be able to say, look, we're your neighbors. We're just people that love dogs as much as you love your dog. So how can we get your dog back to you? How can we make sure this doesn't happen again? How can we refer you to like low cost spay neuter options? How can we get you a microchip so that at least I know this is your dog and I can get it back to you quickly? So, so is it a matter of the community blaming itself? I don't know. I just think people are busy and people are in crisis.
Right.
People are working 2 and 3 jobs. People are worried about how they're going to pay for school supplies. People are worried about how they're going to pay for Christmas, and their dog's unaltered, and it's just not something that's gotten a lot of attention. Now, that's been a priority over the last year that we've increased spay neuter. Used to, we did a lot of referrals for spay neuter, right? That the requirement to spay neuter your pet has been a law since 2015, I believe. City ordinance says you have to spay neuter your dog or cat over 4 months of age, right?
Okay.
There's some exceptions, right? If your pet's medically fragile, sure, get a doctor's note. I'm happy to mark that off. If your pet's like a registered like show dog, sure, whatever it needs to do its job. The law enforcement and military canines are excluded, so there's a few exceptions, but by and large, your average pet, right, has to be spay neutered. So we did a lot of referrals. Look, I don't want you to have to pay this $200 citation to the municipal court. I don't see any of that money. It's not something that goes back in my budget. I just want you to spend that money on keeping your pet.
Right.
But what we found was, you know, the pendulum swings, right? Where we were so friendly and so much outreach that people are like,
Taking advantage.
it doesn't matter. They won't follow up. I'll give a fake name, whatever it is. And so last year we issued almost 500 tickets for spay neuter alone.
500.
Yeah. And so that is, that's been a priority. Now, puppy intake was down when I ran the numbers for fiscal year 23. Now, and I know there's this criticism of the shelter being closed when we're approaching capacity, and there's language about let them roam. I don't have a let them roam program. I don't have a let them roam policy. There's never a time where I say, hey, animal services.
Do you know
officers,
where that's
roam.
come from? Do you have any clue where people in the community are getting that? Because I have seen that. Do you?
Can I tell you, when I speak to other like-minded communities, like El Paso, Lubbock, right? Because when I first adopted this, I was like, guys, we can never be Austin. We can never be like, that's not us,
Bigger
right?
cities.
So I like to look at El Paso, Lubbock. I like to look at some West Texas cities. I like to look at some rural areas. Like, what are other rural cities doing? Yeah. So when I talk to them, they're like, we hear the same language. It's like a national mind hive, and it's just being shared, like it's bouncing around. So if you're a community,
It's like a trend.
yeah. And so if you're a community that's seeking life saving, and there are critics of that, then that's common language that crops up, right? That let them roam. Because I was like, because does it rhyme with something? Like, I can't even think of a time where there's never been a time, right? And so if the puppy is loose in the street, I'm bringing it in every time. But my puppy intake was still down in fiscal year 23. I think it was down over 20%. 20% fewer young dogs came into my shelter last year. And I have to think that's because 20% fewer young dogs were born, right? Could it be because people were able to keep their dogs secure? Could it be because a number of things? And I'm not saying there's no puppies loose. That's not what I'm saying. But when we go out, or when a person finds a dog, if it's a young dog, of course that comes into the shelter. We want to get it set up for success. We love our Good Sam program, where if you find a young dog in particular. We designed our Good Sam program specifically for parvovirus, specifically for young dogs. That if you find, a dog under a certain age,
Okay.
we're going to ask you, hey, do you want to participate in our Good Sam program? Because today we're going to scan it for microchip. We're going to check the lost and found sites. If it's not owned, if we have no indication of an owner, which every dog came from somewhere, right? Cats can spontaneously occur. Every dog came from somewhere, right?
Yeah.
So this dog has a name, like it came from somewhere.
Yeah.
You should have a pet communicator, like a pet psychic on here one day. I don't know. Have you already done that and I missed it? I'm sorry. I just want to know, like, where my shelter dogs, where did they come from?
Is there a
What was their
pet
name
psychic
before?
in San Angelo?
Yeah,
I
hit us
need
up.
to get you on the podcast.
So we can't find any owner information, and so we go ahead and we vaccinate that animal, and we send it home with the Good Sam for days, right? And we have an emergency contact for them to call and say, hey, this dog's not doing well, right? We started this program for medical. That was our main concern.
Is that the same thing as fostering? Like they're
It's not. So our Good Sam program is meant to be very short term. It's for, another name for it is like friendly finders. Although we think that sounds kind of creepy. So we're workshopping some new names for it, but every name we come up with, we're like, I don't know what that means. But yeah, it's legitimately like, I was driving down the road and this puppy was in the street. So I pulled over and picked it up and drove straight here. And we're like, thank you. It's chances you clearly care about this animal, because nobody spent 30 minutes of their day catching a dog they don't know, putting it in their car, driving 6 miles across town to my facility, right? You did this because you cared about this animal.
right.
Can I tell you some other things you could do to care for this animal? And so we offer vaccines, we scan it for microchip, we send you home with a crate, donated dog food, all of these things, right? And then we stay in touch with you. How's the dog doing? We posted it on our Lost and Found. Did the owner get, we've heard from the owner, or have you heard from the owner? And so we started that program for puppies so that when they came in, they had a better vaccine history and were inoculated against parvovirus. So if they did have an exposure, they were less likely to contract it, right? Because before we did that, we just had uncontrolled parvovirus in the facility and just new puppies being exposed daily. And that was really tough because we wanted to do everything we can to save these animals. So we started our Good Sam program specifically for puppies, but it's grown to be so much more. And San Angelo's been really receptive to it. We've had hundreds of participants in our Good Sam program, for cats, for dogs, of any age, and people are like, yeah, I'm happy to hold on to the dog. And we follow up, we stay in touch. Hey, it's been 3 days, just double check in. Have you found the owner? Yeah, I found the owner, we connected. I meant to tell you, thanks for following up. Or, do you know what, I've actually fallen in love with the dog, or my mother-in-law was looking for a dog, and we say, well, bring it by for a microchip, we want to at least get it registered to you. So our Good Sam program has saved our bacon and has gotten a lot of animals into the shelter with some medical history, right? At least now we know it's had some vaccines a week ago or whatever, and some behavioral history. So they'll bring the dog in and they'll say, oh, you know what, this dog loves whatever, or he's been with my other dogs, he does great, or he is not good with cats. Be careful. I kept my cats safe, but just watch him. So it's a really great program, and I think it's a sign of like San Angelo's full of helpers, right? San Angelo is neighbors helping neighbors, and that's one good sign of it. We have a lot of good success in our Good Sam program.
That's great. If you find a dog or a cat and you're feeding this dog or you're caring for this dog, and then you want to, until you can get them to the shelter to turn them in, I've heard people say that they're told that that's now their animal. Is that true? Like, how is that? Like, if I were to see a dog on the street and I take him in and I start feeding him, maybe I take him to the vet to get checked out before I take him to the shelter, and then I drive him over to the shelter, and I tell him, I found this dog like a day or two ago, I fed him, I took him to the vet or whatever. Would you tell me, well, that's now your dog, we can't take him? Like, is that?
No, I do see where people are saying that, and this is what I observe is going on, right? So all our literature and all the graphics we're putting out on social media and on our website say, if you found a pet, hold on to it for 48 hours and then come see us, right? Because there's there's magic 3-day law. So city ordinance says if you house, keep, harbor, feed, care for an animal for more than 3 days, you're the owner.
Okay.
Right? And does the law need to change? Sure. Could it be changed to 5 days? Could it be changed to a week? It could be changed to something reasonable, right? Is 3 days the number? Listen, if it's Thanksgiving Day weekend and you found the dog on
You can keep
Thursday
it
and
over the
closed on
weekend.
Monday, then we can offer some grace there. That makes a lot of sense, right? But what most of the folks that I find that it escalates to my level, and what I mean by that is, like, I office full time at the shelter, but I'm generally not the one like answering the phones or greeting folks when they first come in or going.
Right.
Like when you call for stray dog like down the street from you, I'm not necessarily the person responding and going to that call. And so the ones that are escalating to my level, like complaining, like I want to speak to a supervisor, the person that's held on to the dog, I can't tell you how many times people call and they're like, hey, can you take in a dog? I have this dog that needs, and I'm like, oh, is it your dog? They're like, no, it's a stray. And I'm like, oh, when did you find it? And they're like, oh, 10 months ago.
Oh, well,
And I'm like, well, yeah, I would say that's your dog. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we just say, we do offer rehoming services. Let's get you connected with that, right? And so folks that have held on to the dog for 5 weeks, folks that have held. So I would say, is there some room to edit the law? Maybe. Does it need to be 3 days or a higher amount? Yeah, we can consider that.
But there has to be that point where you're like, okay, well, this is actually your animal.
There's some
You've been
reasonable
caring for
expense.
a while.
For sure.
Right.
Yeah. And we still help, we still have programming to help with that. But we do ask you to fill out a quick form. Let's get you in the queue. Let's vet what's going on with it, right? Because one thing that's tough that I think also is contributing to dog at large is if you call me and you are wanting to turn in your dog, you wanted to impound your dog, you don't want your dog anymore. I'm gonna say so. One, can I confirm you live inside city limits, because we're funded, we're City of San Angelo, we're funded by tax dollars. Two, what's going on with the animal, why do you want to give it up? And if they indicate the animal is somehow experiencing reactivity, the animal has a bite history, the animal showing aggression, something like that, we're going to say, well, definitely if you have the resources, we would encourage you to seek out, behavioral support, any kind of medical support, right? Because if there's something medically going on and he just doesn't feel well, so he's snapping at people, sure, let's explore all of that. But absent that, and the animal's truly reactive in your home, I don't know what you think I'm going to be able to do with it. If your home is what this dog knows, and he knows all the rules there, and he's happy there, and he knows his name, and that's where he's been, and he's behaving this way, how do you think he's going to behave at the shelter? How do you think he's going to behave in an adoptive
In anybody
home?
else's home, right?
That's tough. And you and I have both taken dogs in our home that are special needs dogs. I can't foster anymore because I have this giant boy that doesn't like anybody. And he likes my household and he likes my dogs, and that's it. And I fostered him for 3 years, just thinking that unicorn adopter's gonna come.
Right.
And he's very reactive. He has a lot of issues. I have been through 6 basic obedience classes with him and beyond. We've done all the things. I've done the DNA testing. He's just super territorial. And he decided that we were his people, and we didn't know yet. So all that to say, we have a really reactive dog. But if there came a point where his aggression was unmanageable, unpredictable, I would have to do the tough thing, right? There's no other home for him. And so when I say to somebody, gosh, it does sound like your dog has unmanageable reactivity, and I know you have different language or that, you have so much more expertise in this, but just if you have a dog that has some aggression background, we're gonna ask you as the owner to make the tough decision to have that pet euthanized. Right, that's part of pet ownership. And so when we say that to someone and they don't want to do that, right, it's either too hard emotionally, maybe financially it's not something they can handle, and then they just turn that dog out. Right, that's my concern, is that we've made it so we're putting that responsibility back on owners, and I think it's appropriate to do so. The bell curve, the reasonableness test, I think your average with San Angelo would say, yeah, if you own a mean dog, which I'm oversimplifying, I think there's a lot of things, but if you own a mean dog, you need to be responsible for that mean dog either being secure or not being out in the community, for sure, however that needs to happen.
Right.
And so when we say to people, yeah, gosh, that sounds tough, you've done all the things, and I think you're looking at euthanasia at this point, I'm so sorry. And they're like, what? I thought you would take my dog. And I'm like, well, it's your dog, so we would ask you to be responsible for that. And I take it seriously, and it's a tough decision, but it's part of pet ownership.
Yeah, and it's a hard part, and it's a hard decision to make. If you have an animal with behavioral issues, serious reactivity issues like aggression, you have a couple choices, and it really depends on the owner and how far you're willing to take it for this animal. Because you can do something like put them in a program with me, do some behavioral modifications, see how far I can get with them to help you. But you still have to be dedicated to the training and working with this animal. You have to be willing, like that animal's obviously going to have limitations. You're going to have property, fencing, everything that can hold that animal in. The animal should be crate trained, stuff like this. You really have to be responsible if you're going to have an animal with any type of reactivity. If you're the type of owner that either you don't have the finances to put them in a program like mine, or the care or time or whatever to make sure that the community is going to be safe with you having this animal, then yes, euthanization unfortunately would be what you would have to do. I mean, otherwise you're risking the life of another animal, the life of another human being, and that's not fair.
It's not fair.
So yes, I agree with that. Unfortunately.
And it's tough.
It is tough.
It's a tough conversation for us to have with somebody.
Right.
It's a tough thing for somebody to have to consider, especially, I can't tell you, every time I have that conversation with somebody over the phone or in person, they're just gobsmacked. They're like, what? You won't take my dog? And I'm like, well, yeah. The issues you're having in your home are exactly the same issues I would have.
Mm-hmm.
And at what point are my staff, our partners, like, what risk am I exposing them
And sometimes shifting that animal around like that increases that level of
100%.
reactivity.
100%.
So it's not helping them for sure. And then you can't expect somebody else, because you don't want to work on this issue. You just want to dump this dog off onto the city, or hoping that somebody else adopts them and will deal with it. And that's not fair. It's not fair to the dog. It's not fair to the city. It's not fair, to anybody that would want to adopt that dog. Nobody comes in, I'm sure, and is like, hey, I want the most reactive dog you can. And if you do, you should probably call the cops when if somebody's coming in asking for it, But yeah, no, that's definitely a tough decision, but it is something that is part of being a responsible pet owner, because it's not always. Reactivity isn't something that's always created. Sometimes it's genetic, and the dogs, just as they grow, they develop this. So yeah, you have to make that, unfortunately, the decision. Yeah.
I want folks to know, and I want you to know that, like, there's good things happening in San Angelo Animal Services. We are one thing, and I know we're here to talk about dogs, but we changed so much about cats last year. And our save rate for cats in 2022 was 63%. I only saved 63% of my cats last year. That means only 63% were adopted, returned to field, a return to owner. I lost a lot of cats, hundreds of cats short of no kill last year. And this year we hit 83% for cats.
Oh wow.
That's remarkable movement in 12 months.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of conversations
that's like
at the front.
20% increase.
Huge, yeah, huge, hundreds. So hundreds more cats saved. Huge benefit. We stayed about flat. We saved 92% of our dogs this year, which is about standard for us. That's what we generally do, and so we maintained that even in a tough year, even in all the things we weren't resourced to do, and all the battles that we were facing, and all of that. Still, really strong performance there. Of course, our wildlife and livestock, we always have like better than 97% live release rate on those two species, but just there's some tough things that are going on in our community, but the numbers say San Angeloans are here. They're here for animals, they're here for animal welfare, and they're here to offer a reasonable accommodation at Live First. Again, to speak to the tough decision about euthanasia, right? Like, could we hold on, like my dog, right, that I fostered for 3 years? I was looking for that unicorn adopter that didn't have small children, didn't have other pets, and was happy to maintain that for the life of this pet who was 6 months old, right? He has his whole life ahead of him, right? And so when I started fostering, he was 6 months old. So that we're not in a position to be able to hold on to those unicorn dogs, right? And so, yeah, if someone comes into the shelter, and we used to try to like work it, like, I have a mentor group that I follow out of another community, and they have a quick questionnaire just when you first walk into the facility, like, hey, what what kind of dog are you looking for? Do you have any other pets? Do you have kids? And if you don't have pets or kids, they like come meet you with like, they roll out the red carpet. They're like, there's this dog that really needs you because you are the unicorn adopter that could have this dog. You're the only chance for her. And then people were like, bamboozled.
So they seek out those unicorn adopters.
They like
talking
carve them
about.
out. Yeah, they're like, we are here for you. You're leaving with a dog today.
That's awesome.
And so we've not been able to source that in that way, right?
Yeah.
I'm a fan of theirs, and maybe we'll be there one day. But in general, I have happy, healthy dogs at my place. Lots of good dogs. But I do think this spay neuter ordinance has worked, and I think it's worked us out of small breed dogs. I have very few small breed dogs.
Right.
If I do, it's like a tan chihuahua, right? It's like the dominant color, I guess.
Yeah.
No matter how you breed a chihuahua, eventually they turn out to tan. So I have a lot of, medium-sized dogs, over 50-pound sized dogs, because that's also something I'm really passionate about, is working with landlords and corporate, like, property management companies about having truly pet-friendly housing, right? That you tell me that a 10-pound dog is less damaging to your property than a 50-pound dog, because sometimes you have to replace the carpet after every 10-pound dog was in, and some 50-pound dogs are happy to be like lazy on the sofa and not tear up any furniture. So I'm like, please consider like truly pet-friendly housing. I think that's one of the biggest issues we're facing, is people are having to move and make tough decisions financially about where they can live, and they're winding up in a situation where they can't keep their dog.
Yeah.
And that's all I have now is dogs over 50 pounds. Anything smaller, I can move really quickly. They get adopted, they go right out. But I had a colleague visit the shelter that hadn't been there in years and years. And she said, "Where's your small dog room?" She goes, "This area over here used to be where we house the small dogs." I said, I don't have any small dogs. I think today I have 3 dogs in my small dog room, like dogs under 20 pounds. They go back to, owners are able to keep them longer, so they're more likely to come if it's a small breed dog, and they get adopted more quickly. So yeah, it's my large breed dogs, my large over 50-pound mixed breed dogs. I don't know what they are, but they're big and they're lovely and they're nice, and that's what we're trying to do.
So it's a mix of funding and then just community outreach and supporting one another, educating, is really what it sounds like that we need to keep, tackling this, like eating away at it. Now you all need a better facility, stuff like that. And again, that's funding, and we talked about how do we get funding. We need to reach out to government here and say that that's an area, we need that piece of the pie to be bigger.
Yeah.
So if people do want to help out the shelter or the animals there, what type of does I know Paws has their own programs, but does the shelter specifically have, like, can you volunteer to work at the shelter, or can they go there separately and walk dogs? Like, can they volunteer to clean, or like what can the community do, like physically hands-on, to help?
Yeah. So we don't have our own volunteer program. Just we would want a program that's managed appropriately, where we're recruiting folks, training folks, onboarding folks, and supervising folks, and we just haven't been staffed to do that, right?
Okay.
And so we do refer folks to Contra Valley Paws for the volunteering, so walking dogs, all of that. But so there are still ways to serve, right? Like, one, our Friendly Finders or Good Sam program, right? For sure, plug in for that. And it's not uncommon that when I'm full, I call like an old Good Sam that was really good at it, and I'm like, I know you didn't find this dog, but could you help? Would you apply to be like a proper foster through Contra Valley Paws, who we work closely with? We're co-located, we're right there. We lean on each other a lot. So so one, being a friendly finder, advocating for pets, and that's another thing. We connect with folks, and we're like, hey, can you hold on to this dog for a few days? We're approaching capacity today, and they say, I just can't. I my housing, I can't hold on to it. And we say, well, can you continue to advocate for it, right? Like within a day or two of the dog coming in, we're posting it on our Facebook. So share it and say, I met this dog, it's super nice, I hope it gets back to its people. Or, hey, I noticed he's still off his stray hold, please go adopt this dog, it's the nicest dog. So even just that virtual advocacy, that there's lots of activity on social media, there's so much time to be able to push certain messaging on social media, and some of that messaging can be, here's this super adoptable dog, or here's this clearly owned dog, where it's people. I don't know why the busiest Facebook group in San Angelo is like the swap and sell one.
Right.
Like everything happens in the swap and sell, and I'm like, just pick one of my dogs that's on, because I do a daily like claim your canine of like, these are the dogs that came in this week. Is it one of your dogs? City, yeah. And so pick one and just save it in the swap and sell. Share it like, hey. And my favorite thing is when someone comments and tags their brother-in-law, and they're like, "Isn't this your dog?" And the brother-in-law's like, "No, it's not my dog." And, like,
and then they call it
100% your dog.
I saw my dog on the swap and sell.
I love it. I love a brother-in-law calling somebody out, and I'm like, "That's your dog. Come get it." Yeah. And so online advocacy, and still just pushing for shining a light on those specific bases, because I think that's how you fall in love. Like San Angelo Animal Services, are we a giant bureaucracy run by the government? I guess so. But just picking up base and falling in love with a base, and just continuing to advocate for that pet and pushing, even if you're not in a position to foster, although that's like the highest level of what you could do.
Do y'all do like sponsorships? Like, can they sponsor a dog that's in the shelter? Like, bring food for it, offer, like donate for medical or anything? Is there any type of...
Yeah, through paws. And so you can be like a PJ pal, and so you can check the dog out for like day dates, and like take it for like a pup cup at Starbucks. Do you know what I learned? The biggest thing my dogs are lacking, right? Like if you could get a pet communicator to talk to a dog in like kennel 8, do you know what that dog would tell you? I need a nap. I need a quiet place to be. Like, we want to take these dogs out and let them run at the dog park, or we want to let them have a break from the shelter. Sure, but the hardest part about the shelter is it's loud. It is not peaceful.
Stay up somewhere, let them decompress for a couple hours.
Yeah, and I'm like, if you have like a spare backyard,
quiet house.
Let them have a nap. Let them have a quiet time. Yeah. So being able to check them out and take them out on day dates and things like that, that's super important. We also, the animal shelter is governed by an advisory board. The city council, of course, oversees the whole city, but the animal shelter advisory board has some vacancies on it. And so if someone wanted to get involved and meet and help set policy and help, a part of that is a requirement to volunteer at the animal shelter. And so those folks do serve in that way. But all of our animal shelter advisory committee meetings are on YouTube if somebody wanted to know more about it and what's involved in that. But we have a really dedicated team of folks that are setting policy and giving direction and making recommendations to city council about what needs to be done.
So the advisory is kind of like a spokesperson for the community, basically?
Yeah, and so they get in deep on these issues, right? Because we've talked about, you're very involved, right? And you know my animals, and you work very closely, and you do a lot of work. And there have been things we've talked about today that maybe were new to you, or you didn't know that level of detail about. And so these folks on the Animal Shelter Advisory Committee, they get in deep on this stuff. And we do, animal control was created to prevent the spread of disease. And so this group gets all the reports about rabies virus and what's going on with that in the community, and what reports of positive specimens we have. Like, this group gets in deep on it, and they affect real change and make recommendations for change.
That's a lot of great information, and I'm glad that you are sharing that with us. I'm actually thinking I'm going to ask you about that later.
Yeah.
But is there anything that anything additional that you would like to put out that you feel the community should know, be aware of, anything?
One thing that I've noticed, it was a blind spot that had to be pointed out to me, is like the average steps to expect an animal services response, if that's a way to put it. Just that the phone rings off the hook at Animal Services, right? And we take calls for service all day, every day.
And how many employees are there to collect those calls?
I'm staffed for 2 to cover the phones and walk-in traffic for customer service. We regularly are recruiting for those jobs. I'm currently fully staffed on that part of it. So Two folks are taking those calls for service, referring people to programming, like if they're asking about rehoming services, or dispatching those calls to the animal services officers.
Okay.
So one thing so it didn't occur, since the phone's ringing off the hook and so many people are able to call in and report things, one thing that I'm finding is I'm connecting with folks too late, right? I spent a good bit of time on the phone on Tuesday with a resident who was describing a scenario that happened in her neighborhood in June that was really concerning. And then another thing happened in September, and I said, ma'am, I've got nothing on your street, in your block. Like, I don't have any calls, I don't have any animals impounded, I don't have any complaints, I don't have any email, I don't have anything. Like, I've looked. And she's like, oh, well, they didn't call it in. And I said, well, why not? Like, and I said, you did a lot of good things, right? Like, you alerted your neighbors that have small children, you alerted your neighbors who were senior citizens, like, you've done some work on this. I would ask you to do the additional 15 minutes of looking up our phone number and calling us. So just for folks to have a general idea, right? Like, when should you call animal services, or what should you expect from animal services?
Okay.
If you see a loose dog, call 657-4224. Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, we take those calls for service, dispatch an animal services officer. If you see an injured animal of any species, right? Wildlife, livestock, cat, dog, you call us, injured animal, we go to that, right? And we actually go to that round the clock. That's an example of an emergency call. So if it's after 5 o'clock and you have an injured kitten that wandered up on a Saturday morning, call our after hours emergency line, 657-4315, and we'll dispatch an animal services officer to go make contact and assess that animal and see about getting its necessary medical care. So if you're someone who has reported a dog at large, now aggressive dog at large, that's also an emergency. We'll go to that any time of the day or night, right? If it's after 5 o'clock on a Monday and a dog charges you and is growling at you and has its hackles raised, you call us, we go to that after hours, right? So those are a few examples. If you're someone that's called before and you're like, I have called in, these dogs, they belong to my neighbor, I know where they live, he just lets them roam, right? I get that call all the time.
Yeah.
I say, what is that address? Well, I don't know, it's the White House 2 doors down. Okay, I'm gonna look it up on Google Maps, I'm gonna do my best, but you're our eyes and ears in the neighborhood. Next time you run to the store, can you double check that address? Call me back later today, let me know that exact address, because we're promoting responsible pet ownership, right? We're gonna do, one thing our animal services officers do is case management, right? And so if they identify where a dog lives or where a dog potentially lives, we're gonna make contact with that owner. We're gonna get that dog back. We're gonna do a free fence inspection. We're gonna get you matched with a microchip. We're gonna refer you for a spay neuter. We may cite you for not having your pet spay neutered. And then once we give you a chance to work some of those things, we're gonna follow up. Hey, did you ever get your rabies vaccine? Remember that was past due. And so that officer stays with that household, because again, if I impound their dog and take it, they're just gonna have another dog in a matter of months. And we just wanna promote all of that. So let us do that work for you. But if it is something where you've called it in several times and we're just not getting it, right? If I only have 4 animal services officers and these dogs are at large and you've called in a couple times this week, it's possible it took me a good while to get over there. Because I have one guy in court testifying about a cruelty case. I've got another guy working at the emergency department working a bite case, and whatever job is vacant. So it's not unusual that by the time I get there, the dogs are back on their yard. And so for that, we would say there is still an opportunity, right? There's a citizen complaint form that folks can complete through our attorney's office. And it actually calls for a hearing before the municipal court, and the judge can order this dog a nuisance and say, and because I'm in the people business, but also, it's rare that it's a nuisance dog. It's often that it's a nuisance owner, right? The dog's not a bad dog.
Right.
They just have a fallen down fence, or they just let the dog out.
Right.
And so I often have the privilege and the opportunity to testify before the judge and say, we've met the dog, it's a nice dog. But it is a problem that it's loose all the time, right? All the time, 6 times in the last month, or whatever kind of metric we want to do. And so for folks that are those eyes and ears in the community and are seeing, because it's 2 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, you saw the dog at large because you live right there and you were woken up by it or whatever. So being able to testify before the court and say, look, I love a dog as good as the next one. I'm in this reasonable part of the bell curve that I believe in people having pets and taking care of their pets, but part of that is that they keep their pets secure, they're responsible about it. And so the judge can actually order a few things. He can order a deferment and say, I want you to have a fence, I want it inspected by animal services officers, we're gonna impound the dogs until you figure that out.
Mm-hmm.
Or the judge can say, there's so much evidence here, I'm ordering the dog impounded today. It's not your dog anymore, I'm taking it from you.
Right.
And it can run the gamut anywhere in between, and it really just depends on what the owner shows up with that day to defend the behavior.
Right.
Right? And so even if we're not seeing the dogs at large, even if we're not catching them, because the old school like dog catcher, I'm not a superhero, right? If the dog won't come to you, it's not coming to me either. And probably like I have a radio on and clunky boots, like that dog's not coming to me. Right?
Yeah, the dog's gonna go, oh no.
Yeah, and there's so many, you know, you mentioned like the square miles were covered in the community.
Right.
There's so many pockets of town near a natural area that dog takes off and I'm in like a big heavy duty truck, I can't chase it.
No.
The dog's faster than me and I can't drive
Mhm.
towards it. And if I did, am I furthering an unsafe situation, right?
Mhm.
So all that to say that there's still resources available. There's still avenues to either encourage or force owners to be responsible.
Mhm. Speaking of the animal control officers, and we talked about how there's only currently 4 that, you know, due to funding. And so until we're able, or we're in a situation where you're able to have more animal control officers, these calls that either go unanswered or take hours for them to get to, is there like a plan B or another option? Like, can they call the police department? Is there something they can do if they really feel like it needs to be addressed and there just isn't an animal control officer available at that moment?
Yeah, there comes a point, right, that it's a straight up public safety concern.
Mm-hmm.
So for sure, there is a point that you do call law enforcement. I would encourage folks to call the police non-emergency number, which is our after hours number. So after 5
Okay.
o'clock, police dispatch actually is taking those calls and dispatching the animal services officer. So if you call like Thanksgiving Day, 657-4315, you're gonna reach the police department and they're gonna call the animal services officer. So that, yeah, there's a point that it reaches that you're like, I am in this moment concerned for the public safety,
Mhm.
right? I would be really careful with that because there is laws around like abusing 911 and calling in for frivolous items.
Like, make sure it actually is an emergency.
Right,
before you
be
do this.
super careful with that. I don't wanna just put that out there like, yeah, call 911 right? But there is that point, right? That a reasonable person would say,
Mhm.
I have a concern for the public safety. I had a concern for my own safety. And so because San Angelo Police Department has officers patrolling round the clock and has like a 3-minute response time, whereas I've gotta get the animal services officer from their home, drive across town, you know, whatever it may be, that is sometimes the fastest response and what needs to happen for those really extreme circumstances.
Okay. I think we pretty much, I mean, I've had you here a while. So, I mean, if you have nothing else, I think that's it.
Okay, good. Thanks for your time. I do agree that there's just a lot of chatter right now and there's
Mhm.
a lot being stated and there's a lot of really concerning things being stated, and having the opportunity to, you know, present our side of it and what's going on. Just the number of times, like the discussion that I mentioned where, man, I don't have any record of this call in June or this issue in September. That's just happening again and again. We spoke to a resident who referenced 10 dogs at large in a certain part of town, and we said, we have never gotten this call. Like, we know nothing about it. And she says, well, it's all over social media. And so she was actually speaking to the supervisor over the animal services officers, and he said, to be frank, I can't patrol social media, right? Like, my newsfeed isn't your newsfeed, and so I'm not gonna see it. And that swap and sell group is so busy. Like, you'll see something in the swap and sell group that I'll never see, right? Because there's just so much happening, like it never comes up in my feed. So please give us that opportunity to respond. Escalate things to a supervisor when you need to. Please let us do that work and help us defend why we need it. Like I tell my boss, it's just a matter of money. We've got to have additional staff to be able to provide for the public safety.
It all comes back to funding.
It does.
Yeah, and just the community they have to have patience with y'all right now, and just understanding you all will do what you can with what you have, and that's really all you can do at this point. You're understaffed when it comes to animal control officers. Your facility isn't updated. Like there's a lot that needs to be done. You all are aware of it, but it takes the funding. It takes money. So until we can get that, like I said, that piece of your pie bigger, I think the community just has to have that patience and understand and do what they can, be responsible owners, check your properties, don't just let your dogs wander, make sure they're microchipped, make sure they're spayed and neutered.
Yeah, bug your brother-in-law.
Yeah.
Hey, aren't you sick of that female dog having another litter? I've got you a voucher here.
So, thank you again, Morgan, so much for taking the time out to chat with me for over an hour.
Yeah, edit it down to whatever. But yeah, I appreciate your time as well. It's been a really great opportunity to get this message out.
All right. I think that's it. No, thank you so much for doing that.
Yeah, for sure.
That was a lot, and I think that's a lot of stuff that, the community needs to hear.